You will only regret the things in life that you don't try. And you have to give yourself that opportunity. You don't want to get to the end of your life and go, oh, gee, I wish I had tried, fill in the blank.
So, first I'd like to thank you, Sharon Macy, and welcome you to the podcast. I really appreciate having you join me today, and I can't wait to get into the conversation we're about to have. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you for the invite.
I'd like to introduce you to Sharon Macy a little bit. She's the host of Mom to More, which is a top 3% globally ranked podcast. She's a motivational speaker, a content creator, and a writer. She's a former stay-at-home mom who reinvented herself through podcasting and ballroom dance, which I'm excited to learn more about. And today's episode, we're going to talk about how a pause in your career or in working outside of the home isn't a step backward. And we're going to provide practical strategies for finding your more after motherhood, which I think is so important for women in this demographic, because a lot of us did put careers on hold, maybe staying home or not taking that next step in our careers because we had families. And now that our children are getting older and kind of moving on into their own independent lives, a lot of us are thinking, now what? Right. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely intro, and I'm so thrilled to be here.
That's exciting. So what exactly inspired you to start Mom to More?
I would say, Victoria, that it really was an evolution. It was not really a single aha moment. Really, after about almost 2 decades as a stay-at-home mom, I realized that motherhood had quietly been equipping me with this skill set and things like leadership and communication and resilience and creativity. And let's not forget grit for everything that happens, everything that gets thrown at you, in a 24-hour period. And skills that really weren't always like recognized or valued outside of the home, right? And at the same time, I had friends who kept saying, like asking the same sort of quiet question of, what's next for me? Am I too old to try something new? Have I lost my window of opportunity? And I was really inspired by these other women and their journeys and their reinventions and the strength that it takes to, build a new path in life from the ground up. And so I thought, wow, I really wanted to create a space that honored that process. And Mom to More was really born out of a passion of storytelling and encouragement and the belief that the knowledge that the years we spent raising kids are not an end, but rather the foundation for what is going to be coming next. And so I always say that if I can reinvent myself, anybody can reinvent themselves. And, all of these skills, I think that we cultivate in motherhood can absolutely propel you forward. And I wanted other women to be able to see themselves in that period of life and knowing that there is going to be a next chapter. There is a next step. And so I felt that these stories really needed to be told and celebrated. And as we all know, women love a community where we can be inspired and learn from one another. And really Mom to More at its heart really is like that community of like-minded women and women who support and lift up one another.
And I think that, there's so much, even when we were younger, just the tearing down of women again, pitting women against each other and the mean girl spirit, that to have a community of women who are like-minded, who are driven with the same purpose, who want to support you and recognize there's enough room, there's enough space in the room for all of us, that 100%. It's really great to have.
Yeah. That's really important. And that we're all there together. I mean, that was a moment in time when women were really not our allies. We were not each other's allies. And I think that has really changed in the last couple of decades, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And it was interesting. I was thinking about, I pulled out a CV of my own I dusted it off because I've been a stay-at-home mom for 13 years now. And so I pulled out the CV, I dusted it off and I looked at it and I thought there's this huge gap. I have all these skills of being a pharmacy manager, being a pharmacist, working in collaboration with physicians' offices and management. I worked for Target Pharmacy at the time. And so working with a big corporation. And then there was this huge gap. And I thought that this is exactly what people like me need, because we did accrue skills. Just because I didn't necessarily punch in and punch out and get a paycheck for what I was doing,
Yeah.
There's still, and I mean, I think conflict resolution, I used to make a joke that if you put a bunch of stay-at-home moms in a room together, we could solve world peace. Like we could figure out war crises because we have so much conflict management skills.
I'd say, why, yes, we could.
Yeah.
And more moms should be in those rooms.
100%, 100%. So why do you believe that a career pause isn't a career setback in speaking about the skills gained as a stay-at-home mom?
Well, first of all, Victoria, the skills that you have don't disappear, right? You are still whoever you were prior to having kids. Like I was a creative in advertising. My writing skills and my unique voice didn't go away just because I had kids. So I think that's really important to remember. And also, as you know, during those child rearing years, you know, for people who choose to do that, we gain so much knowledge and expertise during this time. And unfortunately, I think motherhood has really been dumbed down to like laundry and diapers.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it is just a complexity of, I'd rather say, actually, backtrack. The reality is that the complexity of parenthood is totally misunderstood in like the corporate world. They don't really, you know, the men who might be hiring you don't necessarily really understand what you've been doing. And so when you think about it, parenting requires adaptive leadership. It requires high stakes decision making, you know, decisions that need to be made immediately. You have to be able to pivot immediately. It requires emotional intelligence, long-term strategic planning. I mean, think about, you know, all of us had those calendars that were all color coded.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we plan everything out, and this whole mom leaning into family life experience is so dynamic. We evolve as our children grow. You know, just when you think, okay, we're at a good spot, well, something else happens and we have to pivot and we have to evolve and we have to grow and so we're constantly learning and changing and pivoting and innovating. And so I think while we are, you know, I hate to use the term just home with the kids because it's anything but, right? We have quietly been earning executive MBAs, every single one of us. And, you know, so whether it's leadership, logistics, psychology, negotiation, event planning, crisis management, communication, innovation, organizational skills, all at the same time. And I just don't think society has really caught up with that yet, or recognizes the innate value of what we bring to the table.
Yeah, that's so true. And it made me think about, even when the kids were younger, a lot of it was, you know, keep them alive and make sure they're safe. And then as they got older, it was recognizing that you need to be a soft place to land, but still give them independence. And so there's all these different shifts in who we are as people. So even though, like you said, who we were before we stayed home with our kids doesn't go away, it evolves, but then there's also just the evolution of our family dynamic too, that I think comes into play.
Mm-hmm. And I would also add what you talked about before, that blank spot on your resume. I have it on mine. If you go look to my LinkedIn page, I have my years as a stay-at-home parent and what I did and all the money I raised, all the volunteering that I did. I think that's really important to itemize all of the little things that you do while you are leaning into family life.
Oh, you know what? I'm actually, people aren't going to see this, but I'm going to write down that I need to itemize my tasks as a stay-at-home mom and put that on LinkedIn, because I think that, you know, that also helps to explain to people those gaps in your, you know, so you took a 13-year hiatus from working. What were you doing at that time? And it's like,
well, let me tell you.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like, oh, I wasn't just, you know, folding laundry while eating bonbons and watching soap operas, which is the stereotype of stay-at-home moms.
Yeah, but that was like June Cleaver. So that was a long time ago.
And the whole, you know, what did you do today? That used to be the biggest question that would drive me bonkers.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
When the husband would come home. So what did you do today? It's like, well, I didn't cure cancer, but I did 95,000 things today that if I listed them off, you would fall asleep, but they all have to get done.
Right. From the mundane to the important. But yes. And I'd say, you know, listen, if you were the parent who was on the committee to rebuild the jungle gym at the kids' elementary school, that's project management.
Yeah.
You know, if you were on a development team to raise money for your kids' school, that's fundraising. And so all of those need to be on the resume for sure.
Oh my gosh, the boosters club, the PTA,
Yes.
the room mom work, all of
Yeah.
the things. And even the techie stuff you have to do. You have to know how to run a sign up genius, and you have to manage, for us, we had our rooms were put on Facebook. We had Facebook groups for each of the room
Right.
moms to run. And so you're managing a social media account for your class. Like there's so many things. Like my light bulbs are exploding while we're talking about this. I'm like, gosh, I have so many things I need to add to my list.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you what skills you personally fine-tuned during your time as a stay-at-home mom, but I feel like we kind of just answered a lot of that. Is there anything else you would add to that list?
I would add listening, because that we have to listen to the kids. And not only are you listening verbally, but you're watching for cues, bodily cues. And I feel that women have an innate ability to read people in a better way than men do. Sorry, guys. But that's just true, because we are so in tune with our kids. We notice little body movement things. We notice hesitation. We notice if someone's scared or if they need to say something. And so I think that, we're more perceptive. I felt like I became more perceptive. My listening skills were really honed. Problem solving, right? Give me a problem and I can solve anything. And so can you. And so can every mom out there.
Oh, yeah. And I think also I would add empathy to that list, because I think there's a lot of that's missing in the workplace these days, that in the corporate world you don't see, that you have to have with kids. And I think even just as recently as last night, I was having a conversation with my daughter about someone that she's having kind of a relationship conflict with, and being able to step back and say, let's look at their perspective and where they're coming from and their background and why they're approaching this in this way can help you navigate. So you're also training others to navigate conflict and to have that by, the binocular lens instead of a monocle lens on a situation that I feel like is missing a lot in the corporate world.
That's true. And that was well said, really well said.
Thank you. Thank you. I try to talk to my kids about the binoculars and the monocle lens, and they're like, oh, here she comes with the double perspective thing again.
Wait, do you always get those teachable moments that we probably have way too many of? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, my thing is, Mom, don't make this a life lesson.
Right.
That's what I get all the time, is the life lesson. So why do you think society often underestimates the value of these skills gained during these years?
Oh, that's a really insightful question. I think because by and large, society is still patriarchal. And there has been a cultural devaluation of women's work. And careers traditionally, I think, are seen as very linear. And a woman's career trajectory is decidedly non-linear, especially if we, lean into family life, you pause the career, you can downshift, or maybe you fully pause it, stop it. And I also think that the whole caregiving aspect and all those things we were just talking about, the life lessons and teachable moments, all of that really happens in the private sphere of home and family instead of in the public corporate sphere. So it is often invisible to the decision makers who really define what counts as experience on a resume.
That's true. And I think that, it's also, it plays into the environment of the workplace. Like when you're entering into another career or a career shift or returning to a career, you're also bringing in just the ability to connect with your coworkers, your bosses, other employees that you may not have been able to do before you were staying home with family.
Right. I think we're so much, like you said, empathy, and we are so much more in tune with humans, with humanity, just by the virtue of raising kids.
Yeah, I think it can change the whole environment of some place that you're going to work. So employers, listen up.
Listen up.
So for those women who are listening right now and they're thinking about, they're at a crossroads, they're not quite sure where they want to go, if they want to reinvent, if they want to stay where they are or return to what they've been doing, what are some first steps that a woman can take? Because there's a lot of freezing that happens in that moment. And
that's pretty natural, because sometimes you have, 10 different things in your head that you're interested in, and it gets overwhelming. So I would first advise, take time for introspection, right? Allow yourself that time to blue sky, get a whiteboard and just write ideas down of things that you've been interested in, you put aside for the kids, you've always wanted to learn. And so really take that time to look inside. And then I would say, as you're doing that, look at your personal talents, look at the things you think you are really good at, look at your passions, and also look at your networks, because friends can make really great collaborators. I mean, I knew two women who were neighbors, and they kept thinking, what are we going to do? You know, our kids are getting older. Do we do a store? Do we do a summer camp? And they realized they live in Connecticut, and they realized that in their backyard, there were kids that were going hungry on the weekends. So they were using the foods given to them during the school week, but on the weekends they were going hungry. So they started a nonprofit called Filling in the Blanks, where they were feeding the kids on the weekends. They did that together, and 11 years later, they are still together.
That's amazing.
Isn't that a beautiful story? Yeah.
And women have that knack of being able to see a problem or see what's missing somewhere and be able to fill in the gap. And even the name was brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
So I think we are. Yeah, I love the collaboration idea.
Yeah.
Because life is collaborative.
Yeah. And the fact that they were able to come up with this together and they're still doing it.
They're still doing it. And what I remember when I interviewed them, it was probably about a year ago, they thought, oh my gosh, we're feeding 50 kids. We have cured childhood hunger, feeding 50 kids a week. Flash forward 11 years, they are now feeding over 8,500 children a week.
Wow.
With the capacity to go to 10,000 kids a week.
That's amazing.
Which is extraordinary, really mind-blowing.
And it also proves to testament that women really they can do amazing, remarkable things. And a lot of them are very charitably driven to take care of other people.
Yeah. I think that's
awesome.
Inherent in who we are.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to moms who feel overwhelmed or they're unsure about how to begin after, you've done the introspection? It's like, okay, now I need to take actionable steps. So what should we do?
All right. So this is pretty easy. You've got to start small, right? We are taking these tiny little baby steps. You're not jumping into the pool altogether. You are like inching ever so slightly toward the shallow end, of the pool, so to speak. And so the beauty of starting small, Victoria, is that if you go down a pathway, you can realize, you know what, this is not working. This is not resonating. I'm not enjoying this. So you haven't invested that much time or money or energy. You can pivot. And that's the beauty of starting small, is you have the flexibility that you might not have had. It's pretty classic woman to go, I need to have all my ducks in a row. I need to have everything perfect before I jump in. Don't. And there's a beauty in just trusting yourself and taking that leap of faith, so to speak, and just jumping in. And I think what's really important to remember is that you've got to have fun in the process, because this is your time and this is about you, not about the kids, not about your spouse. And so I think that could be it's a very empowering time, and it should be fun. It should really be fun as you're doing it.
And I think taking those small steps helps it to stay a little less scary. I know when I started in 2019, I thought to myself, okay, the kids are getting older. They're more independent. I can start to think of something I could do with my time. Going back to pharmacy doesn't make sense because it's 12-hour days and weekends and holidays and such. And with my husband's schedule, that wouldn't work. So what can I do? And then when I started looking into integrative women's health, it was like I kept needing to get another certification before I felt qualified enough to help women. And if I could have gone back, that's one of the things I would have said to myself is you already have your pharmacist. And so you already have a skill set. You can hone it while still working toward moving the needle in the direction of progress. But instead, I just got stuck on, I have to prove that I'm worthy of doing this, or I'm educated enough to do this. And
isn't that such a crazy woman thing that we are so accomplished? I mean, think of all the women that who are staying home with the kids. They're in finance, and they're lawyers, and they're artists, and they're creatives, and they're marketers, and yet we are still we don't feel that we're enough. And I think we just have to sort of kick that to the curb and say, we are enough. we already have everything we need to start on those baby steps.
Yeah. And giving ourselves permission to try something and say, this isn't what I thought it would be, and pivoting, that is another thing, to give yourself permission to say, this wasn't for me, or this wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or this is too much for me to take on. This isn't something I can do right now. Those are all things that I feel like we don't give ourselves permission to do.
Right.
And so like men go out there and they bankrupt themselves trying ideas, and then they just keep trying, and nobody gives them, nobody gives them a hard time, but we feel like we're going to be, burned at the stake if we make a mistake.
Yes. And I think we are you're right. And I've talked to other women about this where, a woman feels, a guy will go, yeah, I have a half-baked idea, here's why you should invest in my company. And women oftentimes feel that we just have to have everything so perfectly planned out and ready to go. But the reality is no. I mean, people invest in ideas.
Yeah.
Right.
That's just, it's so interesting to think of the difference in dynamics, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing I also wanted to say was, we talked about, taking a few steps and being able, giving yourself grace and being able to pivot. I mean, I tried a couple of things before Mom to More, and I failed. I tried sales. I learned I suck at sales, but boy, that was really informative.
Yeah. And I think that women can all think of something that they tried that didn't work out the way they wanted. And if they tried and failed, what was the worst that happened, right? I mean, I think I always worry that if I fail, people will never trust me again, or I won't be credible, and that's not the case.
No.
And I'm not going to lose my home if I try and fail. But I just think that there's so many things that holding us back, that working together in a community like Mom to More, you have other women saying, give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen?
Right. You learn, right?
Yeah.
I think I learned more from my failures, small failures, than I do from small successes.
100%. One of the first things I tried to launch was a group coaching program, and I didn't get the signups that I wanted. And I looked back and I was like, oh, my marketing probably could have been better. I probably didn't explain it well enough. But then in reality, I didn't fully think through the process of what would happen if I did have a bunch of people sign up. And it wasn't the kind of program I really could have sustained having. And so it was almost like a blessing in disguise to have failed, and helped me pivot and do other things. But there are failures, I think, under any woman's belt who is successful that they could tell you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. You're not going to find anyone out there who is successful who has not failed on as getting there, on the journey there.
So for the women who are out there fearful of failure, or they've got the self-doubt that's creeping in, how can they reframe that when they're stepping into something new?
Good question. I would say, instead of seeing a stop sign, take that fear as a growth spurt. It's like you get energized when you know that something exciting is on the horizon, right? You're waiting for something to happen in life, and you're excited to see an old family member you haven't seen in a while. And I think the same holds true when you are on this journey. And so you want to turn any of those negatives that you're thinking, like, oh, I might fail, oh, I'm scared, I will stop. Look at that as you are onto something, and that gives you the energy and the purpose and the reason to keep on going. And I would also say that you will only regret the things in life that you don't try.
That's so
and
true.
You have to give yourself that opportunity. You don't want to get to the end of your life and go, oh, gee, I wish I had tried, fill in the blank. And so have that courage. I mean, we've all raised kids, right? We have conquered the impossible. We have raised the next generation of humans. There is nothing that should scare us or sway us or deter us. We have all that in us. And I realize that when it's for someone else, it's a little easier versus, well, this is me. We should have that same grit and determination and, darn it, I did it before, I can do it again, sort of attitude.
Yeah. I mean, if we think back to how hard it was when they were infants and we kept humans alive, and now they're moving on into the world and they're thriving. That's right. That's so true. That's so true. So the fear of other things can't be as surmountable or scary as the fear of raising children. Really.
Right. And you've already done that. So
Yeah.
you've already succeeded wildly at raising kids. There's no reason why you can't succeed wildly at your next chapter in life once you figure out, what it is that you want to pursue.
So you've talked a little bit about a story that you talked about with interviewing a couple of women who had the nonprofit. So what are some stories that you've heard through your podcast outside of that? Like give me another inspiring story, because I love to hear other women's success stories.
A couple of stories that really were inspiring to me. I had the privilege of interviewing Missy Tannen, who is the co-founder of the luxury bedding company Bull and Branch. And they started a company because she and her husband, Scott, were redoing their master bedroom, and they were moving up from a queen size bed to a king size bed. And then they started realizing that, wow, there's just not a lot of great sheets out there. And it started them on this journey and, figuring out sheets and should it be organic and why is organic good and thread count versus quality of the thread. It's actually all about quality of the threads versus thread count. Who knew? And 10 years later, they have a massive company. They manufacture in India, and just her story of doing the mom thing for about 10 years and then slowly building this company with her husband. And then, of course, the girls got involved. And I thought that was just a real step by step, inch by inch, sort of, how they built this company, which I found really inspiring. And then another woman, for example, Christine Swanson, who is actually a director. And she and her family reached the lowest of lows. They dealt with unemployment. They dealt with homelessness, and how they bootstrapped their way back to working again. And Christine went through, some really dry periods, and how were they going to, they moved out of LA for a while to the East Coast and then drove all the way back with friends, helping them with every stop. But the fact that she was at the lowest of the low and was able to, with belief in herself and just plugging away and just bootstrapping herself, getting into a position where she has more work now as a director. She's back in LA than she knows what to do with, which is just a wonderful full circle story, because she had early successes at NYU, and then, life changes.
Yeah.
So both of those women. Yeah.
The grit and the determination show in that. And I have
Yeah.
those sheets, by the way, and I love those.
I love them. I have many pairs of their sheets. And I started buying those sheets way back when Missy was the one doing the voiceovers, like on the Howard Stern show.
Oh, that's
I go way
so
back
funny.
with them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're great. I love them. And I love buying things from a company with a story like that too.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that celebrating small wins helps build momentum for bigger change?
You want to celebrate every small win, because that just adds to your toolkit of how you gain that momentum, right? You have a small victory. It's like, okay, cool. Check that. I did that. And then you have another. And so all of that gets added to your personal toolkit, your mind toolkit. It adds to your ability to say, I've got this, right? I can do this. And that there's going to be more stumbles along the way, because that's life. But I think celebrating all those small victories gives you the confidence to keep pursuing whatever it is you want to pursue.
Yeah. And I think as moms, we did a great job. Our kid would come home with this horrible piece of artwork, and we would be like, this is amazing. And it goes on the fridge, and we're celebrating it. And, and we do a good job of celebrating our spouse when they have something that happens in their work or in their career life.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't do that for ourselves.
Right.
And I think we need to be better about doing that for ourselves.
We do. We're so great at what we do. We have such a vast toolkit and vast competencies. We need to believe those. We need to believe in ourselves. We need to know that we have that within us to be able to move forward. And I just wish that, and listen, I struggled with that too. I was like, there were periods in my life when I was raising the kids where I'm like, I'm irrelevant. I have totally lost my skill set. Nobody is interested in what I do. And maybe you dealt with this as well. You'd go to a party or a cocktail party and people, a guy usually would say, well, what do you do? And I'd say, oh, I'm just home raising the kids. Hard stop to the conversation. Right. And I wish then I had the phraseology that I have now, which is, okay, I've got the privilege of raising the next generation of humans. What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I will never forget, my mom told me that she went to a work function with my dad, and she was sitting there and a woman approached her and sat down next to her and they were talking. And she said to her, so what did you do with your life before you had kids? And my mom was like, nothing. I did nothing. Because it just shut her down. And I remember thinking, I'll never let another woman make me feel that way about being a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
Like how I'm hopeful that this generation of women, we won't talk to each other that way, but also, to feel like there was nothing before your life because your children are everything, or to downgrade how important it is that you're staying home with your kids because you're not out and getting a paycheck or you don't have a W-2. I hope that in listening to this podcast, women who are at home who feel that way recognize that there's so many things that they're capable of doing. They just haven't thought of it in a business sense.
Correct. And also, depending on, your next chapter, right, doesn't necessarily have to be a paycheck or a career, right? If it could just be something that you love to do. I mean, one of the things I did was I went back to dance. That is definitely not a paycheck. That is more of a, it's an investment in myself because it's something I love to do. But it could simply be going back to something you love to do. But oftentimes I've talked to women who started going back to a passion and then it turned into a business. So you never know where your interests, your passions, your competencies are going to take you. You just have to really be open to those, I'll call them hidden opportunities, because oftentimes opportunities present themselves in a way that you may not originally or initially recognize.
So you have the podcast, but then you also have a community as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the Mom to More community like for women who might be interested in learning more about it?
So the Mom to More community is, we have, at least on my website, we have resources, we've got blogs, all the podcasts are up on there. And it's really just a way to connect with a larger group. I mean, there's a newsletter that goes out, usually highlighting the upcoming episodes, but hoping to get a little more frequent with just life stuff, because we're all always dealing with life stuff. And what I'm finding is that the women are just enjoying knowing that they are within a community of like-minded people. I also have Facebook, but I know that, I want to grow that community as well. That community is a little small right now, but that's another thing that's on my personal to-do list is growing that community where the dialogue can be a little more, front and center, and more women can partake in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and, networking is so important in the business world. Everybody talks about the conventions you go to, networking at dinners and things like that. It's the same for stay-at-home moms, having that network of other women who are doing the same things or learning about what they're doing and seeing how they're being innovative or they're finding new passions at different crossroads. I think that that's really an important place that people need to have, that women need to have.
And also, that's a great idea. And also these relationships that you are building, this network that you are building while you're, home with the kids, just extraordinary women, as we talked about earlier, who did so many things before, but they are still that person. And, maybe someone's working on a project that you want to jump in and help them with. Maybe you sit down over Chardonnay one night and say, hey, I had this idea. Can I bounce it off of you? And you never know where, one thing that's for certain is you never know where life is going to take you. And so I'd say always be open to opportunities to connect, intersect, and just network with people, because life will surprise you. That's for sure. In both good and bad ways, right? And just be open to the possibilities that your network will provide. I mean, think about all the other moms in your school or the moms in the PA or the Parent Association. There are so many incredible women with great brains and great ideas. And so, tap into that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in times of hardship, it's amazing how they come together and how quickly they'll come to your aid and they'll problem solve with you. And so it's a little army almost of other women.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think if you went to four women that you know at your kid's school and say, I have an idea and I'd like to, come to my house, I'll treat you to lunch and I want to bounce some ideas off of you. They'd be like, I'm in, right? Because that's who we are. We're women are there for each other. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I appreciate you coming on and talking about Mom to More. And I think that anybody listening should now be like ready to join the army of Mom to More and listen to the podcast and connect with the community. And again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what you do and how you connect other women. And I hope that this inspires some of you listening to take that next step and push aside the fear and make a plan for yourself.
Thank you, Victoria. This has been wonderful. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and loving the work that you do as well. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. I selfishly have loved doing the podcast because of all the women like you that I've connected with that I never would have met otherwise.
Right? What a blessing. Yeah, it's been great.
For sure.